The Elixir Collector is one card everyone has an opinion about.
It's broken.
It's useless.
It only works in mid-ladder.
You've probably heard all three. You might have even said one yourself, but here's the twist. Every single one misses the point. You likely see the surface, not the substance. At a glance, the pump seems laughably simple. Spend Elixir now, get more later. No attack, no defense, no tricks. It's the only truly passive card in the entire game. So why does such a simple card bring about such heated debates? By the end of this video, you'll see why most players misuse it, how it secretly manipulates tempo, and when pumping can turn a match into your personal economy, or your downfall. What most players think the Elixir Collector does. Let's start with the biggest misunderstanding. Most players think the pump is a simple math equation. I spend 6, I get 8. That's +2. Profit. That thinking is technically correct, and yet completely wrong, because the Elixir Collector is not just about raw Elixir advantage. It's not a coin machine printing value. Instead, think of it more as a time shift mechanic. You're taking Elixir you could use right now and pushing it into the future. You're saying, I'll be weaker now, stronger later, but only if I survive long enough for later to exist. Every time you place the pump, it is an investment. A delayed gratification play that assumes the match will be stable when your return arrives. What the Elixir Collector actually does. To understand the pump, you have to understand time as a resource. If you still think if both players leak, no one is wasting any resources, make sure you watch my last video to improve that mindset. In Clash Royale, defense is naturally more efficient than offense, and that's because you get to react second, you spend less, and most importantly, your towers join in on the defense, which drastically increases your damage per elixir spent. With that in mind, here's a quick thought experiment. If I offered you two choices at the start of the match, choice A is you get a 2 elixir boost immediately. Choice B is you get 1 elixir every 13 seconds for the next 26 seconds. Which one would you take? Most players grab the immediate bonus. That's the trap. Sure, early elixir sounds powerful, but a surplus of early elixir can force bad plays. You feel pressure to use it before you leak, and since you don't know your opponent's deck, cycle, or counters, you often walk straight into negative trades. It's like getting a sudden paycheck before you've paid rent. Great in the moment, disastrous long-term if you spend impulsively. That's where the Elixir Collector comes in. It slows you down intentionally, letting value unfold gradually when information, positioning, and rhythm already favor you. Elixir now may be worth more per drop, but spent recklessly, it's worthless. The biggest misconception is that it's just +2 elixir. This one is a bit tricky because even experienced players fall for this logic. I spend 6, I get 8 back. Simple value. But that's surface level thinking. The pump doesn't guarantee you any increase in value. It's an opportunity for value if certain conditions are met. All of these conditions must be true. Not one, not most, but all. The opponent doesn't punish you during the vulnerable window. You defend effectively while down 6 elixir. The match lasts long enough for returns to manifest. Your deck actually scales with extra elixir. And the 8th card slot your pump occupies isn't more valuable as a support troop or spell. If even one of those fails, your profit becomes 0, or -2 elixir, or sometimes a lost tower. That's why so many players call it inconsistent, because they view it as static value instead of conditional potential. The Elixir Collector is terrible if you get easily tilted during your pushes. You have to tread carefully to make the most of it, because it's so easy to pump incorrectly and immediately lose the game. There are a few cards in the game where if you played at the wrong time, you instantly lose. If you golem into a P.E.K.K.A, it's obvious what the outcome will be, but for the pump, it's much less obvious. The real function of the pump. When you pump, you create a mismatch in the time economy. Right after you place it, you're down 6 elixir. Your opponent sees that instant weakness and knows they have about 6 to 10 seconds to strike before your future income catches up. That gap is what top players call the punish window. During that period, your maximum spending potential temporarily drops. You physically can't defend heavy pushes as well as before. If your opponent recognizes this window, things like Hog Post Ice Golem, balloon pushes, or bridge spam lines, you're in serious trouble. That's why the pump feels risky. Because it is. The Elixir Collector and the match economy problem. Clash Royale operates on predictable elixir phases. Single elixir is for slow information gathering. Double elixir has increased tempo, mid-match shifts, and heavier decks are now favored. In triple elixir, heavy spell cycle like Rocket or Lightning becomes a serious threat, and the match turns into a careful dance between finding the right moments to apply pressure while being forced to defend against constant chip and massive pushes. The Elixir Collector rewrites its progression, but only for you. You start generating ahead of schedule, but while doing so, you temporarily stunt your current output. In economic terms, you front-load risk for delayed compound interest, and here's where it gets interesting. This new timeline doesn't exist universally. You and your opponent now operate in two different economies. That asymmetry creates initiative tension. You're betting the opponent can't destroy your pump or exploit your short window of weakness, and they're betting they can. That's what makes the pump such a psychological weapon. It pressures your opponent into choosing between offense to punish your weakness and restraint to wait it out and avoid overcommitting. They often respond by simply using a big spell, content with a -1 elixir trade. It's equilibrium. They get a few hundred tower damage, you're up an elixir. No one is substantially disadvantaged from this exchange. Wind pumping is actually the right move. This card changes everything. It can completely shift the flow of a match, and if you use it right, it can be the key to winning games you had no business winning. But here's the part most players don't realize. The Elixir Pump isn't a play it whenever card. There are specific moments when it becomes a true game changer. Here are the real green lights for when you should actually play it. After a successful defense, if you've just shut down a push efficiently and are up by 3 to 5 elixir, that's your golden ticket. You have residual troops on board creating pressure, which gives you a few seconds of safety to collect value. When their punish card is out of cycle, identify their primary pressure unit, say Hog Rider or Royal Giant. If it's 2 or 3 cards away, your pump is much safer. This single habit alone can be the difference between winning and losing the entire game. When their spell is committed elsewhere. If they play a heavy spell on your support troops, drop that pump as soon as you hit 10 elixir. You've just opened a window where their counterplay literally doesn't exist. Capitalize. They're going to be forced to pressure you, and you know that. When you're playing a late scaling deck, decks like Golem and 3M are notorious for entering double elixir with momentum and stored economy. The pump sets you up for a flawless transition into double elixir, letting you generate elixir faster than your opponent exactly when it matters most. If you manage to keep 2 pumps on the field as double elixir hits, that extra flow supercharges your win condition at the moment it has the biggest impact. However, cycle or tempo decks, Hog, Minor Control, Log Bait, they rarely want pump. They generate advantages in short bursts, not through accumulation. Running pump with these can actually ruin their efficiency. How to protect your pump. A subtle point most players ignore. Pump placement matters as much as pump timing. Center tile pumps between the king and the princess towers are useful if the opponent has rocket, minor, or graveyard. If you pump in the middle, they can't rocket your pump and your tower, effectively giving you a free elixir. Similarly, if you put it in the middle against a minor, it is helpful because it allows both princess towers to shoot at it. You should deviate from this strategy when one of your towers becomes weak enough, because you don't want them to poison your weak side. Lastly, it is good to do this against graveyard because if you pump behind your tower, they are incentivized to launch a graveyard push, which you will then have to put more troops to counter the graveyard, and then they will get guaranteed poison damage on your troops, pump, and tower. It's okay to pump behind your tower in a graveyard matchup if one tower is damaged much more heavily than the other, similarly to the minor matchup, and it isn't worth it for them to switch lanes. Pumping the middle here is bad because you are giving them poison value on your weak side. Corner pump should be used in almost every other situation because it is a safer spot to store your valuable investment. The corner tiles are the best place to put your pump against a minor because it reduces their possible spawn points from 3 to 2. Against the graveyard, you want the pump closer to your king tower because it is not in line with the graveyard and will make less skeletons spawn on it, making it easier to defend, and if your pump is low enough, there's a chance of a king tower activation. Against everything else, you play your pumps in exactly this order. First pump goes on your stronger tower, next pump goes behind the other tower, a third pump goes in the middle. This is the strongest formation to avoid spell value. Another important thing to keep in mind is that against Evo Goblin Barrel, you don't want a symmetrical pump formation. So 2 outer tiles is bad, 2 inner tiles is bad, anything else is fine. The real opportunity cost of running pump. Running the Elixir Collector changes your entire deck philosophy. That slot could have been your Fireball, Poison, or Lightning, tools that open up a whole Pandora's box of options. Without it, you lose versatility, and you give up spell cycling at the end of the game as an option. Without a big spell, a savvy opponent can play the whole match differently. They know troops on their side are completely safe from being spelled down, so staggering troops doesn't matter. They can also plan on massive counter pushes because they know their troops will be safe on their side, as you can't drop a heavy spell on their counter push for a massive positive elixir trade. Additionally, in some matchups, the pump feels dead. If your opponent's deck constantly applies pressure, you may never find a safe pump cycle, effectively reducing your deck to 7 useful cards. Beyond that, if your opponent has an Earthquake or Void in their deck, don't even consider pumping. These are the only spells in the game that get a positive trade on the pump, and every time you place it down, you hand your opponent free elixir. But in others, no heavy spell, slow deck pace, it feels like an illegal advantage. This trade-off defines control versus flexibility. You're telling yourself, I don't need universal answers. I'll overwhelm them through elixir control later. That's a bold mindset, and one most players default to without fully grasping the risk. The pump's value comes down to one thing: understanding how elixir advantages develop over time. Most players never reach that point because their decisions are driven by results instead of reasoning. That high variance experience makes people overreact. They either spam pump to replicate the snowball games, or never touch it again after one bad sequence. The players who use the pump well simply know their matchups. They recognize when their deck can safely invest, or when the opponent has no real punish threat. The Elixir Collector is one of those cards everybody has a hot take on. Here's something subtle. The Elixir Collector manipulates time perception. And yes, it goes beyond giving you elixir. When you pump, your opponent feels pressure to act faster before your advantage grows. You, on the other hand, feel incentivized to slow the game down, letting your returns mature. This creates opposite pacing instincts, which often makes your opponent play your tempo. You can use that tension to bait early mistakes, stall tempo, and turn their aggression into reactive, inefficient pushes. You want your opponent to feel like they are on the clock, panic, and throw a push of mismatched troops that don't demand a real threat, but it was the best option they had. The best pump players control the rhythm of time inside the match, and that in itself is a subtle advantage, one that defines elite play. To wrap it all up, the Elixir Collector is often misunderstood, and not because it's complicated, but because it demands restraint in a game built on constant reaction. And that's exactly why, in the hands of a skilled player, it becomes a quiet blueprint for victory. Razor's got some holiday deals going. I dropped a link below if you want to support the channel. If you guys want to stay up to date on what's going on, make sure you check the Discord in the description. Happy holidays, boys. I'll see you in the next one.